Hi there, welcome to iTWireTV. Today we're joined by Aiven Solution Architect for Australia and New Zealand, Michael Coates. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us.
Thanks for having me here today, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, now, Michael, we've got an interesting topic about changes in prudential law. Now, that may sound dry, but it's a really serious topic, and Ivan and your good self bring a lot of value to bear, I understand. So, I suppose to start, could you tell me a bit about Ivan and your role in the company?
No problem at all. So I guess Ivan to start with. Ivan's a global open source data platform company. So we help organizations get more value from their data. What that means is, so Ivan has a cloud platform that combines open source services to stream, store, and serve data in a simple, secure way, rapidly on any cloud provider. And we do that across thousands of customers who trust us to build their next generation of multi-cloud applications on top of confidently and quickly.
Yeah, fantastic. No, thank you for that. So, onto our topic. So, the CPS 230 Prudential Standard comes into effect on July 1st, 2025. So, what is CPS 230 and how will it affect Australian businesses, particularly those that are APRA-regulated entities? What's this all about?
Of course. CPS 230 and related 234 are our Australian local implementations of Basel 3.1, global standards around financial regulation. So what do they mean for APRA-related entities? And so these are deposit-taking institutions, any insurers, be it general life insurance, etc., and superannuation funds as well. So what does it mean for them? The key themes or the intent from APRA with CPS 230 is to have organisations be better prepared for risk events. So they need to ensure that they've got effective processes to support and manage response to risk events, reducing their impact. They need to be resilient. So they need to be able to continue to operate through a breadth of disruptions and continue to provide critical services to their customers. And the intent of this and the reason for this is it's to protect the community, but also to protect the entities themselves. So it means business continuity planning, but not just planning, actually exercising those plans to ensure that the impact of disruptions is minimised to tolerable levels, but also by being prepared to reduce the risk of these disruptions occurring in the first place. So what it means for any APRA-related entity, regardless of their size, is that they need to be able to identify, assess, and manage operational risks, and they've got to have controls in place for them. They need to be able to continue to deliver those business-critical operations through severe disruptions, and they need to be able to effectively manage risks associated with service providers. So there's a lot of new regulation around how entities engage with and manage their relationships with service providers, basically to avoid situations where they're locked into single service providers.
Yeah, right. No, that's interesting. I appreciate that. And, they sound like positive things, helping entities manage disruption, protecting consumers. But I suppose, you talked about Aiven, and Aiven sounds awesome, data management, open source. But I guess, what am I missing here? Why is Aiven a catalyst for CPS 230 compliance, and why should APRA-regulated industries pay attention to Aiven?
Absolutely. So Aiven itself, as I said, is a multi-cloud data platform. So what we help institutions with, financial institutions with, is protecting themselves against single supplier failure. Now, admittedly, in this situation, Aiven becomes another supplier, but I'll talk a bit about why or how we manage that from a risk perspective for customers as well. So basically, Aiven allows you to take your critical data and manage that data across multiple clouds, either within the same region or across regions. So why is that helpful? Within a single cloud provider, while you have multiple availability zones, and multiple regions, there are always events that can disrupt services for the cloud provider as a whole, and we have seen those in the past with things like DNS issues disrupting services globally for cloud providers. By having a simple and consistent way to manage your data across cloud providers, from a regulatory perspective and from a business continuity perspective, it's far easier to continue operations when you're running your services and your data across clouds. So Aiven, in this situation, sits in the middle to help manage your data, manage your backups in a multi-cloud environment. It also gives you the advantage that you can do all of this within a single region. So you can leverage the data centers of multiple hyperscalers while still retaining data sovereignty in Australia, in this case, or other regions globally. So, as I said, Aiven in this situation does become a supplier, and so how do we avoid single supplier lock-in in that respect? So, I said up front, Aiven is an open source, a platform of open source data services. So all of the services that we run are the true open source versions of the software. So if organizations wanted or needed to, they could also exit from Aiven by running the same services themselves and moving data into their own managed environments. We just try to make it, and I think we've demonstrated across our customer base, we make it simpler and easier and more cost effective by managing the service for them, so that they don't want or need to do that, but the option is there. And so they, by using open source and not using vendor specific flavors of these technologies, you don't lock yourself into single suppliers.
Yeah, wonderful. No, that's really interesting. So I'm sold on Aiven as a platform, but I suppose the clock's still ticking for these companies. So I guess, how does Aiven then help address and enable the APRA-regulated industries to be compliant ready by July 2025? They've got that deadline.
Absolutely, and we know speaking to people in the industry, a lot of organisations are still at the stage of documenting the current risk profiles that they have, and haven't necessarily moved into an implementation phase. Larger institutions, we're speaking to a number of larger institutions who are adopting open source as their mechanism for avoiding single vendor lock-in. And so for organisations that are adopting open source, Aiven makes it much easier to be able to stand up those environments quickly. So we help in three ways: from a compliance perspective, a cost perspective, and in terms of complexity as well. So from a compliance perspective, obviously as a cloud provider, we need to be compliant with all of the best industry security standards, and so we're certified against SOC 2, against PCI DSS, against ISO 27001, so on and so forth. And so we're constantly maintaining and updating the security standards that we work with, GDPR as well, so that customers' data is secure. For organisations who have their own enhanced security policies. We're also able to offer the same managed service, running in their own cloud subscriptions, what we call bring your own cloud. So you can either run as an Aiven hosted service, or we can provide the same capability, but running in your own environment.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the compliance side. On the cost side, we have so on the cost side, we have firstly we present very clear, very clear, very easy to understand pricing for customers. So for customers who are using Aiven on that we're hosting for them, we give them one number upfront, and that includes not just the service and the management of that service, but also ingress and egress of data, etc. So there's no surprises at the end of the month when it comes to your bill. From a cost perspective, we had IDC do a survey of our customers to find out exactly what the benefits were to them from using Aiven. And across our customer base surveyed, we had customers that had a 37% lower TCO over 3 years, or a 340% ROI over a 3-year period. And that only took 5 months to get payback on their switch to Aiven. We even had one customer who lowered their operating costs by 70%. Amusingly, that customer's name is Miracle, but they lowered their costs by 70% moving to Aiven. So we've got a demonstrated track record with our customers of lowering their costs. And how do we do that? And so this comes to the complexity side of things. So by managing these services for them, we make the platforms more reliable. We keep them up to date, but we simplify a lot of the day-to-day of managing your own services, particularly open source services. So again, our customers found their DBA team was 48% more efficient. So effectively,
Wow.
their DBAs were able to manage twice as many databases as they could previously. IT infrastructure and security teams across our customers were 29% more efficient. And it was even the development teams saw increases in productivity because they were able to stand up environments significantly faster and therefore accelerate their time to value.
Yeah, these are brilliant numbers. That's wonderful. I understand you have a demonstration you can show us.
I do. So probably the best way to demonstrate how easy it is to run up a production quality service in Aiven is to show you. And I must admit, when I've been a DBA in the past. I've stood up a lot of these services, stood up Kafka clusters, stood up and managed Postgres instances and MySQL instances in the past. And when I first used Aiven, I was actually shocked just how easy it was to run up a service, and I say that genuinely. So I'm hoping that you can see my screen.
Yes.
We're on Teams, so I'm never entirely sure. So what I've got here today, just to show you, is this is one of my demo environments, and I've got a set of services from Apache Kafka and Flink for data streaming and stream processing. I've got Postgres, MySQL, Redis in there as well, through to Cassandra. An OpenSearch for which I'm actually using for logging, and these are all out-of-the-box integrations that we have. If I want to start up a new service, I'll come into my project, and I should say these are all, we use projects to manage services, and they're all sitting in an org hierarchy so that you can manage manage role groups and roles and access and privileges and that sort of thing. Very standard sort of stuff. To create a new service, I'll come in, I'll select the service that I want to run. We have alongside Redis, we're also now offering Dragonfly as an enterprise scale Redis option for customers who need it. And we're now offering Thanos for metrics. Those are new. But I'm going to start with Kafka, because anyone who's set up a Kafka cluster before knows that it's not much fun to do. And so what I'm going to do in this case is, firstly, I've got a range of cloud providers that I can choose from. So whether it's AWS, Google, Azure, or even Oracle, I can select the cloud that I want to run in, the region that I want to run in. So in this case, and I can also see the cost that I'm expecting to pay each month, and that's based on an average month. So if I want to run this Apache Kafka cluster in Australia, I can see my cost up front for the cluster. I can select the size of the cluster, and our solution architects, and part of my role is working with our customers to make sure that we're right sizing environments for them. We offer tiered storage for Kafka as well, along with a number of other services, so that you can reduce your overall infrastructure costs. We give the service a name, and I'll hit create. And I've spent more time talking about that than I've actually spent doing it. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to go off and build a new production-ready Kafka cluster for me. That'll take a few minutes, but when it's done, that cluster will be running in Google Cloud in the Australian region that I've selected. While that builds, though, I noticed as I was coming into my demo environment, I've got a few instances that are in need of an upgrade. So we will do all of the point release patching as part of a regular maintenance cycle. And the way we do that is we'll go through and we'll patch a node at a time, so that your cluster it keeps running as you go. So really minimizing downtime with any upgrades. But I've got a major release upgrade. These we warn you about up front. So we give you a view as to when the instance you're running is coming out of support. And because these are open source projects, what that means is when the project itself is no longer offering further security updates or point releases for this version. But upgrading is just as simple as creating a new service. So what I can do is I can upgrade to, I've got two options available in this case. I'm on 3.4 and I can go to 3.5 or 3.6. I'll hit upgrade. And then what that actually does is in the background, and it'll occur in a moment, we actually, rather than doing in-place upgrades, to minimize downtime and minimize the risk associated with the upgrade process, we actually spin up an entirely new cluster. And then Aiven's secret source, our management plane, will synchronize the data between the clusters. When the new cluster is up and running and fully operational, we'll do a DNS switch to the new cluster. So your applications will see a momentary blip as the underlying servers change, and you carry on. And it's only when the new servers are running, the new cluster is running, that we tear down the old one. So by doing this, upgrades are not a situation where you have long outages over a weekend, and particularly for clustered services like Kafka or Cassandra or ClickHouse, our data warehousing solution. These are all done in such a way that you don't have a downtime.
Yes.
You have what appears to your application as a network blip. The connection drops out effectively, and we all have to code for that anyway. So
That's awesome.
So that makes it very, as I said, very simple to do upgrades. That same process, though, of creating a new cluster, synchronizing the data, and scaling down, also lets us migrate between clouds very easily. So we talked before about not locking yourself into single suppliers.
Yes.
And so if you needed to move your data from Google Cloud, or if there were new regulatory requirements where data needed to be living in a specific location, I can migrate the cloud that I'm in just as easily as I can do that upgrade. So this is running in, come back for a moment, this is running in the Netherlands right now, Europe West 4. But I've realized actually I need this data in Melbourne. Most of my customer base is in Melbourne, so I want to move my applications and my data closer to my customers, so that I'm reducing latency. So I'll come in, I'll select the cloud that I want. I could move it to AWS at the same time. Select the Melbourne cloud for Melbourne region for AWS. Hit migrate. And that service is now, that OpenSearch service, which is being actively used by my other services for logging at the moment. That OpenSearch service is now going off and building a new node in Melbourne, migrating the data for me, and that'll be done in the background.
That's fantastic.
And so I mentioned integrations. You can see that this service in particular is receiving service logs from a wide range of my other services. So we've got our own observability platform as part of the stack. And I'm also feeding logs out to an external Prometheus service. So if you've got external tools that you're using today, such as Datadog, or you're using Amazon CloudWatch, or you've got your own services that can take Prometheus or syslogs, you can also feed or integrate all of these into your existing observability platforms. So that's the 5-minute demo without going into the depths of every service that we run.
Yeah, that's wonderful. No, thank you so much, Michael. I really enjoyed seeing that demo, and that really helps. Yeah, give a great picture of it, and that's tremendous. I can understand why you're saying, DBAs are seeing their time to do things cut down. That's tremendous, and the visibility on just where the data is hosted. That looks like an awesome platform.
And you can see in there, I didn't demonstrate today, but those services were actually running in a combination of AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and in both the Aiven tenancy, but also in a bring your own cloud that we have set up. So running in a separate cloud account again. All of the services that we're running are also dedicated to each customer, so they're not on a shared tenancy at all.
Yeah, fantastic. That was a great demo, Michael. Thank you so much for that. And so I suppose, apart from the increasingly complex regulatory compliance, which we've been talking about, I guess what other trends and market opportunities do you see driving the uptake of Aiven managed solutions across Australia this year in 2024?
Absolutely. So I guess there's a few things that we're talking to all of our customers about. The first and most obvious is AI.
Yes.
Over the last 12 months, or maybe even less, everyone's looking at how they can adopt AI into their ways of working. So one of the things that I think that becomes obvious very quickly is that AI needs, any AI or ML projects that you're doing need data to feed them. But also the innovation in the AI space isn't happening within a single vendor cloud bubble. And so we actually, working with IDC again, we asked a range of organisations over the next 18 months how important was Gen AI strategy, how important for their Gen AI strategy was it that they could leverage multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, and over 68% of respondents thought that it was important or critical that they were able to leverage multi-cloud in order to get the best value out of the technologies that were emerging. So to do that, it means that they need to have their data across those clouds. So when we're having these discussions about not locking your data into a single place, it's not just from a compliance and security and risk perspective. It's also from the perspective of how do you maximize, or how do you minimize time to value? How do you maximize the value you get from your data by putting it where you can make use of the best tools? So I think that's been obviously a very big talking point. We're seeing more broadly across outside of financial services, fraud and fraud detection becoming more of a requirement and something that they're actively working on. Retail is a big space for this, and financial services have obviously had very sophisticated fraud detection mechanisms for a while now, but in other areas, in retail, for example, we're having a lot of conversations about event streaming and basically real-time access to data, so that they can do advanced processing to detect fraudulent activity and minimize loss. So that's something that we're seeing, and again starting to use AI and ML fed with real-time data and high volumes of data in order to identify risk events, basically. And of course, we've all got none of us like our data turning up on a list on a dark web somewhere. Only a couple of days ago, I saw there were another 100,000 Nissan car. So Nissan Finance. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe we can cut that out because I probably shouldn't name. But the other thing we're seeing is obviously we don't want our data being breached and being exposed. We've seen quite a number of instances of this over the last year or two, and even this week we've seen a finance company have had a data breach and exposed customer data again, and so consumers have got a very reasonable expectation that their data is held in a safe and secure way. But what we've seen is when you have a diverse set of systems that you're running, when you've got specialist expertise required to maintain them, required to update them, and doing things like maintenance requires outages to critical business services, quite often this maintenance isn't getting done. And what that ends up meaning is that systems aren't being kept secure. And so we see a lot of customers who are wanting to move to a managed service, specifically because they're having trouble maintaining their systems and maintaining the security of their systems as a consequence.
Yes. Yes. No, they're big issues. I suppose just following on from that, so talking about security and the, I guess what would you consider to be the top 3 best practices for financial services industry compliance and risk reduction in this changing regulatory landscape?
It's a really interesting question. From I guess from the considerations, firstly, are obviously all organisations are trying to balance compliance, risk, and security against time to market and time to value for themselves and for their customers. And so choosing, firstly, by using technologies that you can leverage, not just the technology, but leverage the skill set within your teams in a consistent fashion, regardless of which cloud you're using and where you're deploying it, increases your ability to deliver. So by what we're seeing across the industry is there is very much a commoditization of a lot of the standard services across clouds. Each of the clouds will offer some specialist or the absolute best in the industry components, but there's also a lot of standardization that's really occurring across the clouds. But we still see customers who have got an AWS team, a Google team, an Azure team, an Oracle team, as these independent silos, and so they don't have the ability to leverage those resources across the board. So standardization across your clouds can make it much easier to deliver quickly on your projects. Data sovereignty, obviously a consideration. Australia is rather lucky, but elsewhere in the APAC region, customers don't have multiple regions with in country, but they still have the same data sovereignty requirements. And so when they're considering data sovereignty, they have to think about where do our backups go. We were speaking to an organisation recently in Singapore, and their cloud provider had a failover event, and in a failover event, their data goes to Japan, which is actually a breach of Singapore regulation in that particular case.
Right.
So they need to explicitly disable that feature to make sure they're managing the sovereignty of their data correctly. If instead of being within a single cloud, they were managing their data in a multi-cloud environment, then they could have data replicating across multiple cloud providers rather than having backups fail over into a different jurisdiction. So that's certainly one to consider. And we've talked about this a lot today, or I've talked about it a lot today anyway. Avoiding vendor lock-in. So this is not just, I guess, good hygiene from a managing your supplier relationships perspective. It also gives you additional negotiating power. Now, we're not all working in a Big Four bank, and so having the ability to move between clouds as we get better deals and better opportunities, and it means that we can better manage our costs as well as managing the security of our data.
Yeah.
So basically, the way to do that is choosing open source, is partnering with organisations that will help you leverage open source and not use tools that are going to lock you in to a specific vendor. And obviously, Aiven is one such vendor.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that's been awesome, Michael. I've really enjoyed our talk, and I'm sold on Aiven. I guess if anybody listening or reading want to get in touch with Aiven, what's the best way to do that?
So if you want to get in touch, if you'd like to ask me any questions, you can contact me at michael.coates@aiven.io. You can also go to our website. If you go to our website and you've liked what you've seen on the demo, you can also sign up for a free trial.
Oh,
So you can get some credits, sign in, and try this yourself. And it really is the easiest way to understand just how powerful this can be.
that's fantastic. No, I've really enjoyed that, Michael. You've been awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, David. It's been a pleasure to chat.
No, thank you. So that's been Aiven Solution Consultant for ANZ, Michael Coates. Thank you, Michael.